What's going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q here from Retro Q Gaming, and as everyone knows, I like to be at the forefront of technology. I like to push the boundaries. I don't like to be lagging behind any of that stuff. That's why I've got that whole AMD 5900X, the RTX 3090, and, well, I guess if you want to include the meme lately, we have the Xbox Series X, which I guess is realistically just some sort of a test, if you will, just to see how things go along. But one of the things that annoyed me the whole time, it has nothing to do really with the Xbox or the PC or anything really, but I didn't have a HDR equipped monitor, or I didn't have a HDR equipped device essentially. And I got kind of sick of, I'd be playing games on my PC and that HDR box would be grayed out, or I'd be playing games on, God forbid, a console and, well, HDR would be grayed out. So, ever since I picked up the Xbox Series X, I decided, you know what? It's the very start of a new generation. I guess it's finally time to do what I've been putting off for so long. As long-time viewers know, for the longest time I put off buying a 4K device in any way, shape or form for so long. And eventually I picked up my middle-of-the-range 4K productivity monitor. This one at the time was designed for the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro, which naturally aren't really 4K, and you get the idea. But, you know, 4K Blu-ray, VA LCD panel, you get the idea. It was middle of the road. But now we have a new edition, because let's just say the Xbox Series X, and if I eventually get one, the PS5, well, they support output of 4K 120 FPS. So you know what I did? I went and got myself a 4K 120 FPS or 120 Hertz screen. Now, I didn't pick up a monitor in this case, and we all know I've been keeping my eye closely on the Asus Republic of Gamers Swift PG32UQX, the micro LED one with display 1400 HDR, 4K 120 Hertz, yada yada yada. But no, I decided I'd go something a little bit different, because at the end of the day, that's still an LCD monitor. So I went big, as I've been known to do, because I'm your boy Q. And I picked myself up an OLED, one that I've been threatening to do for a long time. And I picked up the meme, if you will. The meme gaming screen. According to YouTube and many other review places and whatnot too. I got myself an LG CX. I got a 55-inch CX OLED screen. Now, I'm going to only give kind of, not even initial reviews or anything, it's just more of initial impressions. I've only had it 2 days. No, I haven't even had it 2 days. It's Wednesday. I got it yesterday. And I'm recording this one fairly early on Wednesday, so you get the idea. Now, of course, naturally, I spent a lot of time yesterday with it. But so far, it's been exceptional. I've spent a lot of the time custom tuning settings. I've tried many different recommendations, many different tutorials, many different lists of settings, whatnot. And I've even tried my own personal ones. And for the record, the ones I settled on were by HDTV Test. They offered what I could even discern as a better picture for my own eyes, if you will. Like, I was messing around with settings and what I liked, and like, okay, I like this, it looks better than what it was initially, it looks better than some of these other recommended settings. And then I tried, among others, HDTV Test. I was like, okay, this looks even better than what I had. So the way I managed to do it was, I had the HDTV Test settings for the Xbox Series X were the best I could find. My next ones, my own personal settings, were the next best thing I could find, and then everything else. Now, having said that, everything else I could find in other lists and reviews and, you know, recommended specs and settings and all, they were still better than the default picture quality, but you could always eke that little bit more out. Now, let's talk a little bit about it. So first off, this is my first proper HDR screen. Hell, it's my first HDR screen. So naturally, I wanted to test it out. Of course, I've made sure it's outputting 10-bit HDR and whatnot. There's a whole process with the settings and all that I was going through. So it is fully customized and fully perfect in settings and all of that, both in the PS4 settings, both in the Xbox Series X settings, and of course the TV settings. And the picture quality is fantastic, absolutely. We all know LEDs offer extremely high picture quality, even if they're not HDR, but just OLED naturally because of the type of pixels, the type of screen, the type of display. It's similar in sharpness and quality and clarity in the old plasma days, if you will. You could always compare a middle-of-the-road plasma to a top-end LCD, and there would just be two entirely leagues apart in picture quality. The plasma TVs would look so much better. They'd look so much more real, so much more natural, so much more lifelike, and just so much higher quality and sharp. And not to mention the color and contrast, which is one of the big appeals of OLED screens. I don't know why sometimes I just flip between saying OLED as a word and OLED as the individual letters, but just bear with me. So we all know that OLED offers better picture quality and better color contrast in general. So you can compare that to something like a plasma TV, you can compare it to something like just a regular old LCD to an LED, whatever it is. You could always check and just compare them and see the big difference. One of the harder things to get across as a great example have been, if you ask me anyway, unless you see it side-by-side comparison, and I'm not talking YouTube videos or anything, I'm talking literally the same two TVs with the standard the SDR version versus the HDR version of the same source at the same time, it's very, very difficult to get the idea and point across. So you can see all your pictures, you can see your approximations on YouTube, you can see whatever it is, it still doesn't get it across perfectly. Now, I will say, first off, the HDR is fantastic. So first off, I've tried several Xbox games. Mainly, I've tried Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, upgraded to the Xbox Series X version. I've tried Halo 5 Guardians, and I've tried Halo the Master Chief Collection, also upgraded to the Xbox Series X version. Halo 5 doesn't have an Xbox Series X version, so that's running off the uncapped, extra powered Xbox One X version, but either way, there's still some type of HDR/auto HDR in there as well. And they all look great. It's that simple. They all look great. But I also watched a bunch of Blu-rays over the course of yesterday and today as well. I watched Blade Runner 4K Ultra HD, and of course that supports HDR. I did the same with Akira. Naturally, yes, I have gotten the free replacement disc, so I do have the HDR version of it as well. And I also watched the anniversary Blu-ray of Alien, so that is the 4K HDR version on there too. And of course, they all look fantastic, especially with the likes of Alien and Blade Runner. Two of the main reasons why I was really, really looking forward to checking those ones out is because OLED screens are notable for their black levels because of how the pixels operate. They're essentially self-lit, almost burning pixels, if you will. There's no backlight behind them or anything like that, which is why they can give the blacker blacks than the likes of LCDs or LEDs or anything like that. And detail and black levels and contrast in general were one of the reasons why I loved plasma TVs so much back in the day. But here's the little bit of the issue. Yes, they looked fantastic. You could tell that the OLED screen was doing wonders for both these games and these Blu-rays. And you could tell, arguably, that OLED, just in general, because of the color, the contrast, and the quality, it was doing something extra. And of course, you assume at the time, because it's HDR and the HDR is enabled, you can even see it pop up to indicate that HDR is activated, you can tell it looks really, really good, and you could tell it probably looks better than it would without it. But without seeing, like I mentioned, side-by-side exact like-for-like comparisons, it doesn't get it across just as well. But having said that, there is one other way that I can absolutely 100% confirm to see the difference being massive. And believe it or not, this is on the PS4 Pro, because, I don't have a PS5 yet, or if I'm even going to get one. Although, having said that, because of the quality of the screen and what it's enabled for, I'm probably going to get a PS5. I'm probably almost going to guarantee get a PS5 earlier than I should because of this. Anywho, back to what I'm talking about here. So naturally, you turn on the PS4, you enable HDR, you set it all up, you have to customize it and calibrate it and whatnot a little bit in there too. And of course, it is a separate input, so I had to re-go through all the different settings, enable PC mode, all the usual stuff, change and calibrate everything slightly differently because it has a different output and different support from the Xbox Series X. But even at that, when I went in to one of the only two Sony games that matter over the last 8 years, The Last of Us Remastered. By the way, the other one is Shadow of the Colossus Remake. It's absolutely not The Last of Us Remastered 2. But when I went in to The Last of Us Remastered, and you get to the main menu, it recognizes you have a HDR capable display. And it doesn't have it activated by default, and it asks you on the main menu, it's like, you have a HDR enabled device or HDR available device, would you like to enable it? You hit yes, the screen flickers for a moment, and you can instantly see the jump between SDR and HDR because it's happening practically live in front of you, a switch back and forth essentially in a split second. You can see the difference, and that one really cemented it for me. That was my holy shit moment. Because it's one thing when you boot up Akira 4K and you watch it on a standard, well, I was going to say standard definition, an SDR 4K screen, a VA LCD at that, and so naturally it can't display HDR. And then you go and watch it on a HDR enabled 4K OLED screen. You can tell it looks better. You can tell the colors are better. But of course, that's because you're coming from the likes of a VA screen. You're not going from an SDR OLED to a HDR OLED. It's all these letters and acronyms are all over the place in my mind right now. So it's given that you expect such a bigger jump in quality, not just because of HDR, but because of the screen technology itself. But the big one is when you see it flip the switch right then and there in less than a second in front of your eyes, and you can straight up see the before and after practically instantly. It really, really, really cements it. And remember, it's flipping a switch from an SDR OLED to SDR on an OLED to a HDR on an OLED. So you can see the difference, and it is massive. That was the one that really, really, really sold it to me. I was sold on it in general because I could tell looking at it, it's like these colors are fantastic. When I was watching Akira, the bike slide scene, the red bike from Canada, oh, it's just so good. By the way, shout out to his Arai sticker. I got one of their helmets. And of course all the neon in Blade Runner, the black levels in Alien, you get the idea. It all looks fantastic, but when you do see it flip the switch right then and there in front of you, in less than a second, back and forth, it really, really cements it. So naturally I'm playing through The Last of Us again, as my favorite PS4 game, and one of the only reasons to own a PS4 one of the only reasons to own a PS4 for Sony first party games, so you get the idea. I'm looking forward to playing that again. And you know, I'm going to admit, this TV and these settings and this quality and whatnot and the features on it have impressed me so much that I have legitimately considered replaying The Last of Us Part 2 only on PS5. Only on PS5 because it has the 60 FPS patch. There's no way I'm playing that game again on 30 FPS. But I am curious to play it again at 60 FPS now that I have the ability to display it in HDR and play it at 60 FPS. It's still a trash awful game, but I would be curious to see how that goes when I do get a PS5. Hell, I don't know if it even supports it, but I'm also considering replaying not all of, but a little bit of Persona 5 Royal, simply because the colors and style in that game, the artistic choices, even the menu and whatnot, are amazing. So I would love to see that pop on a HDR OLED. Especially with how red that game is. The reds look absolutely crazy. I did mention Canada's bike in Akira, and with just how much red and black is featured in Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal, they're two of my favorite colors to display on a screen like this. The reds are so vibrant and just completely pop, and of course, the black levels. Wow, anyway, here I am talking away for about 15 minutes for something I expected to talk about for maybe 4 minutes, so you can see how much I just got carried away in the just talking about it, with how happy I am and satisfied I am with it, that it just kept me going and going and going, and well, time flies when you're having fun. I do think it's funny that because of just a boredom purchase of a useless console like the Xbox Series X, I finally got around to buying and pulling the trigger on a 4K 120Hz HDR OLED that I've been threatening to do for a long time. On a quick side note, right before we end off the video, I did manage to get this one relatively cheap because, of course, the new C1 model is coming out very soon. It comes out next month here, not next month, 2 months from now, here in August in Europe. or at least in Ireland. So what they did was they put all the CX models on sale. It was only a single one weekend sale at the time, and I was just lucky enough to stumble across it. I saw that they had the 48-inch version down to an extremely low price. It was down to 1350, down from I think 15 or 1600. I believe it was 1599. And I thought, you know what? It's a slight reduction. It's down cheap enough. I would consider buying it, maybe. But then I noticed, wait a minute, there's also a 55 and a 65-inch version. And I noticed that the 65-inch version was also showing up in the search results, but the 55-inch version was not. Now, of course, the 65-inch was, I think it was 1899 or something like that. It was in around the $2,000 mark, but where I wanted to put it, a 65-inch wouldn't fit. So I decided, you know what, if I'm going to spend $13.50 on a TV, maybe I'll see if I can get the 55-inch version if it's not too much more expensive. And lo and behold, I found out why it wasn't showing up in search results. You could find it manually on the website, but it wasn't showing up in search results. Even if you specifically searched for a CX, an LG TV, or a 55-inch TV, or any combination of all of the above. Because it turns out they had overstock of the 48-inch, and that's why they were selling it off for that price. But the 55-inch was reduced to $13.50, the same price as the 48-inch version, which is why they were keeping it out of the search results. So naturally, I picked up that one, the bigger screen, the same screen for the same price. And 7 inches bigger. And hell, the last TV I had in this room a few years ago was a 50-inch. I didn't want to go down, even if it was 2 inches. I'm all about going bigger and going better. Hell, if I wasn't putting it in this room, I would have waited for the C1, I believe it is, and they do something like a 75-inch. I would have put that big bad boy downstairs. But no, it's in my little gaming office, if you will. But anyway, that's it. That's the whole video. That's the point. I'm tremendously happy with this TV. I do have it highly recommended from myself with this now. And of course, check out depending on what video you need, if it's like PS5 settings, PS4, well, he didn't have PS4 settings, but PS5 settings, or Xbox Series X settings, or whatever it is, check out HDTV Test. He has videos for all different types of sources and whatnot, and all different types of screens and whatnot, not just specifically the CX, but the CX does seem to be the popular meme, especially among all those fanboys and YouTubers and all out there, but I can see why. It is a highly praised, highly recommended screen. It's won multiple awards, and, well, to be honest, it's fantastic.